Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you are coming in on YouTube and you'd like to join in Zoom, you'll see a little link below that you can actually use. If you are here in Zoom and you are wondering how all these panelists became panelists and you're just an attendee and you have things to say, well, you might. And we'd love to have you. You just have to get here early before 6:40. We open the doors at 6 o'clock. At 6 o'clock, from 6 o'clock to 6:40, we can't really promise anything. We're roaming around between technical issues and just random issues that we're talking through. It's kind of us just warming up. So, but it's really usually a fun part of the conversation. So 6 to 6:40, we're doing that. 6:40, we distribute the Discord link. The Discord link is where almost 800 of us keep talking about all this stuff. And so if you want to join, you have to be here then to get it. It's expired already. At between 6:40 and 6:42, we will start the mic checks. Once we started the mic checks, that is the size of the panel. We're not going to add more people. So if you want to be in the panel, you need to be here by 6:40 Pacific Standard Time. At 7 o'clock, we're going to we go into general Q&A, and then we anything you have questions around media. And again, I recommend finding a place that you can write down your questions, things you don't understand, things that pop into your head while you're working. And write them down somewhere, put them in your notes section, put them in Evernote, write them down on a piece of paper, and then bring them here in the morning. Let us all kind of chew on them. I can't promise that we'll find the answers, but I can promise that we'll discuss them. So anyway, so come bring your questions, ask early, vote often, and then we'll do as best we can to get through it. Second hour is usually some verticals. First day is kind of a wild card, Monday. Tuesday is audio, Wednesday is cameras, Thursday is generally artists, and Friday is education as well as Saturday. So those are kind of the verticals, and we'll be sending out some stuff. We're finalizing our schedule. A little late, but we know that Rick Salmon will be here on Wednesday. He is a great photographer. He's going to be talking about his process and how he approaches stuff, and so we're pretty excited to have him on Wednesday. And then we'll have LumaForge this week. I'm just finalizing the day. So those are the big things that we have coming up. And if you want to share this, if you want to tell other people about it, use the link that I'm posting into Makana. The link to Makana is in the old chat, is the link to the new chat. And in the new chat, there's a link there. Don't use your own link. Everyone will come in as you. So use that link, and that's a more generalized link. People can register. So there you go. And we're going to hand it off to Chris to start managing some of these questions. Whoa, we got a lot of questions today. So the attendees have figured this model out now, and now pressure's on panelists to be concise. So with 17 questions to start the hour, I'm going to challenge our panelists to be concise. Don't go around the house twice to go in the front door. So try to really think about giving concise answers. Okay, and I may not get to everyone every single time. I'm going to probably cut things off if I feel like we've gotten far enough in that piece. So don't take it personally. All right, next, let's go ahead and jump into the questions.
Our own Jeffrey Powers from Madison wants to know what your thoughts are on the NVIDIA buying ARM. Are we going to start seeing Macs with NVIDIA graphics inside?
I don't think we're going to see Macs with NVIDIA graphics. I mean, we're going to see, I think the ARM, Apple's got its own process. I mean, ARM really empowers folks to build their own chips, not really use other people's chips. I think it makes sense for NVIDIA. I don't know if it makes sense for Apple, but I think that the NVIDIA buying ARM isn't going to affect Apple that much, because the issue that they have between the two companies is there's nothing personal there. It's just they both want control over how the drivers run. So I don't think it's going to have any real effect on what that works. I think I really felt like Apple should buy ARM, but it would have been so complicated because so many other people are using ARM. It would have just been a mess for them. So I think they just had to wait and see. I don't think NVIDIA is probably the one that they wished for, but I don't think it's going to greatly affect it. Anyone else have any opinions about that? No? Okay, there you go. Next question.
Mr. Wojcik from Concord, California says, I'm being interviewed on Instagram today. Is there any way to use something other than my phone? Yellow Duck? ? Bluestacks Android emulator did not work to change to a virtual camera.
Yeah, the Instagram is such a anyway. So if you want to stream, you can do Yellow Duck to do an RTMP output. For the real-time interviews, I think you're stuck with what they have. That's a whole different pipeline than the streaming. So I think that you're stuck with trying to make your phone look as good as you can.
Yeah. That's what I was afraid of. but
Yeah.
that's what we're
I
gonna
mean,
go with.
we've built a lot of rigs to make those phones go. We put electrosonics into Ceramonic, inputs and better lights and everything else. You can make the phone look pretty good with some work, but it's pretty customized set of pieces to make that go. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Would your phone layering, that phone flipping thing work?
Yeah.
Where you put the phone? Okay.
You could you point the phone. You wouldn't be able to do it today. It takes a while. It's a couple hours of work to get it to work just right. But what we were talking about is having the phone look at a screen, and then you could do whatever you wanted and feed the audio in. And so that's a workaround we've used for phones for a long time, because there's always this idiotic, we're going to make everybody play by the same rules, and we're going to keep them all on the phone. Go ahead, Stuart.
Just a little confusion in the question there. Is he saying that he's being interviewed with his Instagram or on somebody else's? And if it's his, why not stream via OBS or vMix?
No, it's the Chamber of Commerce wants to interview me on their Instagram. So I'm stuck with what they want to do. Uh-oh, Jeff's got a solution.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, convince them that you're a video professional and that there's a better way to do it than Instagram. That's the simplest solution.
But if that's what the audience is.
I will admit that we don't always win, but we trash talk Instagram pretty much constantly. Just like it's not a professional platform and no one should use it for that.
But they're using it, and so they think it is. But it's your job to convince them there is better choices. Help them.
And
help them.
We don't do it in a way that loses the client. We just do it in a way that subtly undermines Instagram. So it's just because anyway. There's going to be a point where actually doing great content online is going to be more and more important. It's getting more and more important, and by lowering the standards of it all the time, they're slowing the whole process down. And so it's unfortunate. Go ahead, Stuart.
Well, actually, I just muted myself by mistake. I would suggest to Chuck maybe offer to host it for them to their Instagram, send it from your system to raise the quality and show them how good they can be and be their new hoster.
Oh, that's a case where you could actually use Yellow Duck and use some sort of call-in system like OBS.
Go ahead, Chuck. Chuck, you were going to say, and then Bill, real quick.
Yeah, no, we've actually hosted to really good result stuff for them before. This is just a Monday series that one of the ladies does, and it's just quick to their Instagram for their followers, and it's specifically targeted at young professionals. So I'm just gonna roll with it. I was hoping to do some, production value, but we'll just talk about it and then do another event for them later.
Bill, real quick.
Yeah, I was going to say exactly the same thing. You probably have an Instagram native, a young person, and in this case, a young lady she's comfortable with that and she can do that. So that's what they're going to do. And I just think you got to roll with that.
Next question.
Yeah, let's move. Speaking of making cameras look better or phones looking better, Tony Mobley from Newman, Georgia, I believe, right, Tony? Can you share more use cases with FiLMic Pro? Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, the basic use case of FiLMic Pro is anytime you want more control over your phone camera. So it gives you manual control of things that some phones don't give you manual control over. And that clean aperture add-on that they just did recently lets you put out a good solid signal without a lot of interface junk on it. So it's useful that way.
Yeah, go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, the other big thing is the codec. There's a 4K FiLMic Extreme codec. So if you're just used to shooting with a regular iPhone camera, it's squashing it down to that HEVC codec and throwing away a lot of information. So that's a good use case for buying that software, is if you want squeeze the best every last little bit of color and resolution out of that phone, get FiLMic Pro. Now I sound like an ad.
Question. No, it's good. I think that most of us that have iPhones that do any kind of real shooting with them have it, I would guess. So it's a pretty standard app at this point. Next question.
It's funny to me to hear the phrase iPhone and real shooting together, but yeah, they get used a lot.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I shot the tutorial that we did on how to build our kits was all shot on an iPhone, and it was super fast. Like it was, I thought about it. I was thinking about shooting with the 6K. I just go iPhone 6K Airy, or kind of my, my how I kind of stack up. And so my iPhone, I decided to shoot it all handheld, and it worked great, and it for informational stuff, there was no reason to shoot it with anything more. It was, and it was fast to edit and everything else. Anyway, next question.
iPhone 11.
Brett Ramsey from Melbourne says, I have a regular upload speed of only about 9 megabits per second, but when I try to stream from Zoom to Facebook Live, the rate plunges to a max of just under 3, but regularly drops below 2, making many of the streams unwatchable. Any tips to try and increase and stabilize the stream rate?
Go ahead, Stuart.
Okay, I should point out Brett's actually a mate of mine. We've both been associated with his TV program called In Pit Lane, which is motorsport news. And Brett and I are the people who do the live streams out of Calder Park for the drag racing. Brett's dealing with a problem with what's called the National Broadband Network here in Australia, which gave you options according to where they rolled it out, whether you were connected via fiber optic cable to your home, like I've got access to, or whether fiber optic just went to the node and then you had an ADSL2 connection. I think that's what Brett's dealing with at the moment. So I would be looking first things as if there's any pair gain set up, which there shouldn't be on NBN, or whether he's been stuck with the Wi-Fi version of NBN, and then look at quality of service adjustments within his home router.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing to remember is also that Zoom does cap out at about 3.2 megabits per second. So that's as fast as you're going to go on Zoom currently. And I mean, we haven't seen anything higher than that anyway. And so I think that's that is what it is. If there's not a lot going on, it might try to be more efficient. If it doesn't think your network can handle it through packet loss, then it'll step down, or it'll try to step down to try to make that work. So it could be definitely and you should never do anything that you care about on Wi-Fi. Jeffrey?
Wouldn't something like going to ReStream help bring that to Facebook through a United States carrier, Stuart, at all?
I don't think it'd make any difference, because it's Zoom and it's clamping down, not Facebook. Go ahead, Beju.
I just had a question about this. When Zoom streaming to Facebook, is it going through your machine, or depending on your connection, or it's directly from the server?
It's going down because you're connecting to Zoom. It's streaming from Zoom's server to Facebook.
Okay, because I was thinking if it's your connection, you could host it somewhere else, basically.
Yeah.
Just host one Zoom and have the host off that somewhere else.
Unless you're doing a screen scrape, Zoom is sending from its server to Facebook, which is what you want, unless you're doing a screen scrape. Stuart?
Yeah, just our last Zoom thing that we did on Thursday night last week, Brett's connection actually dropped out, and we could actually hear echoes of him in the background in our audio while the other 5 of us still had good connection. So I'm also wondering if there's been any local works that have been done and if that's affected the cables nearby.
And really unstable connections can do all kinds of horrible things to real-time communication. It used to crash Hangouts, but Zoom is more robust, but it's still having a really unstable connection. Having anybody have an unstable connection can have repercussions across the system. Next question.
Lucas Herzog from Mainz says, I love this idea, by the way. Can we sometimes record the sound check? Would love to show it to my colleagues as a best practice.
Go ahead, Roscoe.
Yeah, if you look at some of the education hours, you can get a sound check that's been recorded, and it's part of YouTube. You just have to find the transition between the questions at 8 o'clock and the education hours starting at 8 o'clock.
Yep. And maybe we'll find some time where we go early, just so people can see it. Like a little, sometime this week, maybe we can maybe tomorrow, since we're doing audio, just remind me, and we'll just start the stream early, and I'll do a quick announcement, and then we'll do the mic checks, and people get to watch us do it. No pressure for everybody on here, but you're going to do your mic, you'll do your mic check on YouTube. That's the easiest way for us to kind of grab the highest resolution of it. Next question.
Tony says, I'm sorry, but what is a MixPre, and why do I need it with an ATEM Mini?
You don't need a MixPre.
No.
Just want to make sure we're clear. Like, you don't have to have one. There's plenty of audio that sounds just fine without it. But a lot of us have them because they give us a lot of control. There's a couple things that the MixPre does. One is that it lets you mix a couple sources. It's got great preamps, so we can hook our kind of higher end mics into it. And it has a thing called noise assist, which lets us get rid of a lot of our background noise relatively cleanly. So again, I don't want to get into this. Like, you don't have to have a MixPre. You can definitely get on a Zoom without it, but it's a pretty nice little box. Go ahead, Jeff.
Another thing you forgot to mention is it does have delay built into it, which is very useful for adjusting sync.
Yep, absolutely. Go ahead, Jeffrey, real quick.
I saw a video last night of somebody that took 4 SM58s and he put cables together and used them, plugged them into mic 1 and mic 2 directly, dynamic microphones. So you can do something as simple as that. I wouldn't do that. If you need to do more than one source,
like, that sounds like a horrible idea.
if you need to do one or two more sources, then you want to have some sort of mix, or MixPre being one of them. I have a QSC Touch Mix hooked up to mine right now, so you can choose what you want from.
Sky, real quick.
I just received mine. I'm still learning that exact question, so I love the feedback because I trust you people, and it feels like a great solid piece of mixing kit.
It is. Victor, 10 seconds.
Very flexible routing, which makes things really easy. I love that.
Yep, absolutely. Next question.
I actually recommended Skull Candies to somebody who needed a very low budget solution, Sky, just the other day. What software, James Babbitt says, what software would you recommend to find and remove duplicate files on a Mac?
Go ahead, Bill.
I use a program called Tidy Up. It's been around for decades, and Tidy Up will go through and it'll identify, and you can determine, is it size, is it name, is it both of those things, so that you can avoid false matches. And then it says, I found 10 of these. Do you want to get rid of all but one? And so it's fast and easy.
Go ahead, Roscoe.
Gemini, works the same way Bill just said.
Gemini 2.
Gemini 2, thank you.
I'm too paranoid. I do it by hand. I won't let any program go find them. Like, I'm just like,
I agree.
It makes my skin just like go, oh yeah. Like I don't like the idea. So but I do get it could be efficient. Go ahead, Bezu.
Yeah, Alex, the nice thing with Gemini is that you don't have to let it to do it. It just gives you a very nice comparison of where the files are sitting. So you can see what the file size and the data is. So it makes it a little bit easier to do the manual stuff.
I feel like there's dependencies on the files, and there might be a good reason that there's 2 of them. And I just like, oh no, I'll do it all by hand. Thank you. All right, next question.
Jeff Francis says, I'm looking for a short tutorial on the basics of video switching on an ATEM, and specifically he's talking about the TV Studio Pro 4K. Program, preview, transition, multi-view, display, etc. for newbie student operator orientation.
I don't know if there's any good videos that are, I mean, so as far as you're talking about really creatively or how it works, Jeff?
Just very basics. So I can send it to someone before I sit them down in front of the operator panel.
Yeah, I mean, Photo Joseph did a really good one on the ATEM, which is on YouTube. So it's Photo Lenashki or Joseph Lenashki, but Photo Joseph, I think is and he has a good one on YouTube. Of course, the Ripple training stuff is really good, but his is free and it's on YouTube, and you can just watch it. And he did a fair bit of work on covering how the operation goes. I don't know how much he got into the creative end of it, but he definitely got into like how it works. So that might be a good quick orientation.
Is that on the TV Studio Pro 4K, that model?
No, he did. Oh, you're talking about TV Studio Pro, or you're talking about Mini?
So Jeff's
on, yeah, no,
well, Jeff is here.
Mini.
Jeff, which model ATEM are you talking about, Jeff?
Yeah, the 4K TV Studio Pro 4K.
That I don't know. I haven't seen. I just haven't looked for it, so I don't know. I bet you there's not very many good ones. Go ahead,
I searched and there was one that seemed to be good, but the audio was just unbearable.
You already have yours. I don't have mine yet, but I'm in the same boat. I looked and there isn't much. So you and I will have to do one.
And this is all the all-in-one. Is this the all-in-one kind of? Yeah. I don't have a lot of experience with that one because we got one of them, and my big frustration is all the wiring going into the back of it, which is convenient in some places, but it drives me absolutely crazy because I want that all in the rack, and then I just want an Ethernet that goes out to it. And so, we got one, and I think we put it into one system because the client requested it, and then we were like, we're never using that again. So, but again, it's our workflow is always that control board is somewhere a lot different than where the switcher is. But I do think it's for a lot of things. If you have it, is it racked or is it on a table? Is it going to be in a permanent location?
Permanent location on a table.
Oh, that would
and then also have a system that is the next step up that has the rack switcher with the separate Ethernet control. But it's basically for someone to sit down who's never done video switching to be able to choose next source, choose transitions, really basic overview.
Yeah. Someone needs to do that because I train TDs in Africa to do that, and it takes 2 or 3 hours, and then they're done. And they have to learn how to handle the flow, and they'll learn lots of other deeper things. But understanding basic downstream key, basic switching, basic routing is pretty much can be done very, very quickly. That's one of the nice things about the ATEMs in general is that they're really easy to learn. Chris, and then John.
In all the training I ever did of TDs, I would tell them to sit at the panel and read everything that's etched into the panel, whether it's silkscreen or etched in the metal, because some engineers spend a lot of time thinking about every word that they put on that panel, and to just read it. So many questions will be answered if you really pay attention to what's physically there.
Go ahead, John Preto.
So this is maybe a good question for 1F Jeff. Do you want to learn, or should you learn both, of the paradigms of the old jargon of old ways of switching versus software-based switching? And what is your opinion on that, Mr. Jeff?
Well, since you called me out, I would give Jeff Francis the same similar talk. It's not that somebody needs to do it; you need to do it. That way, it's you discussing with them exactly that gear and going through it. So sit somebody there that you need to teach, and just record it. Then let them watch it. That's all you need to do.
I mean, the main thing is that what I'm trying to get around to, which I won't get around to until later in the winter, is at best is really trying to think of like these little 1-2 minute things that just explain. You watch a playlist that it has all the little this is how you do a downstream key. This is how you do this. This is how you do that. And I'm not going to get to that anytime soon. But I think that's what's missing right now for a lot of these things is just I don't want to watch a 30-minute video. I want to watch how to do this one piece. And that's the part that I feel like is missing with most training for most hardware and software. Go ahead, Chuck.
Well, I want to say I just saw something who had done that perfectly, and I don't know if that was the MiMo live training page or something like that, where they had just short little videos and a list of links to each and every step. And I agree with that. One thing I was going to say for Jeff Francis is a lot of it functions the same way as the old Ross or Grass Valley switchers. And so maybe there might be some old videos floating out there.
Yeah, the paradigms are pretty different. Like I definitely looked at those ones while I was researching some other training. I was looking through theirs, and the way creatively maybe, but they don't show that much creative. Most of the videos I've seen on those are just like how to run it. And their interfaces are very different, and much more complicated than what Blackmagic does. Next question.
Peter Collins from Vail, Arizona. Recommendations for an HDMI splitter for adding monitoring to an HDMI KVM switcher. The goal is to repurpose KVM as a video switcher, 1K or 4K video.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
I got one from Triplite, TRIPP-LITE, that's active, uses a little wall wart, but the signal coming in from one HDI and going out 2 HDMIs has been virtually identical. Haven't had any issues with it at all.
Go ahead, Stuart.
I hate that I'm going to give the Alex answer. Buy an ATEM instead. Switching with that sort of setup is just awkward, and they will find it much, much simpler to use an ATEM Mini.
Yeah, I would agree.
But I didn't think they were switching. I thought they just wanted to split it. I'm using it for my teleprompter, so I've got one out from the ATEM going to the feed and one going to the teleprompter.
In the question, the goal is to repurpose KVM as a video switcher. I just wouldn't do it.
Let's use a video switcher for a video switcher. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, keep in mind as well that on a KVM, every time you do a switch, your source and destination hardware need to do a handshake and you're gonna get, it's not gonna be a clean cut.
And the thing is that totally made sense before a lot of these switchers became so cheap. Now they're just, like we needed to just put a watermark on, a whole bunch of videos that went out, a whole bunch of live different streams. And the cheapest way to do that was just to run it through a little ATEM switcher, because we looked at all the watermarking hardware and it was all very cumbersome and painful and twice as expensive or 3 times as expensive to do. So the hardware has just become very cheap to do that. Next question.
John Well says, from Midvale says, I'd like to thank the group for the recommendation of the Pile over-ear mic. Is there a similar recommendation for a reasonably priced shotgun mic, mostly for recording the voice from 15 to 20 feet away?
John Idelson, sorry.
Yeah, we had a lot of luck. I just put it in the chat with it's tack-starred, I think SGC 598. It's a $27 shotgun microphone. And Curtis Judd did a review on it. It's amazing for $27, and we used it in some of our classrooms.
From 15 or 20 feet away?
Well, no.
Curious. Okay. I was just that's the only part I asked.
No, the only thing is cheap microphones. For 15, 20 feet away, I use this SoundCheck, if that's a little parabolic microphone. Like they use in football games.
Go ahead. Okay, pretty quick. Phil, I'm sorry, Bill, and then Victor.
Just remember, you can't beat physics, the inverse square principle. 20 feet away, that's 400 times less sound pressure reaching the head of the microphone than if it's at 1 foot. That's always going to be, anybody walks in between you and that microphone, their sound is going to be 4 times louder than what you're trying to record.
Go ahead, Victor, real quick.
This weekend I used a Movo VXR10, little tiny, not really a shotgun, but it worked very well at about 9 feet away when I did an interview. I'll put a
I rarely have any mic that's more than 2 or 3 feet away from the subject. I find some excuse to get it there. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, even a mic like the MKH70, like I wouldn't use it. I wouldn't get usable dialogue more than 5 feet away from the source.
Next question.
Everybody has a different barrier for usable. Who knows what they need it for. Doug Ferguson, our own Doug Ferguson, says, microphones outside. Do foam covers or dead cats work better for wind suppression? Dead cats. Can we move on?
Yeah. You want to answer that, Mickey? Dead cat.
Yeah, pretty much. The one.
Oh, arm's reach. The arm's reach game. What does he have within arm's reach?
This is what people call a dead cat, which Rycote calls a windjammer. This goes over a bunch of stuff. The windjammer goes over a Zeppelin, and this would cut out more wind noise than just a plain old foam windshield.
The issue is the pores on the foam pick up wind. Like that's the issue, and so you hear this, coming across those pores that you don't get with the dead cat. Yep, that's great. Thanks, Mickey. Stuart, real quick.
Like a typical hierarchy, like for indoor situations, like most of the time a foam windscreen would do, unless you have to do quick swings for like if you're shooting reality and you don't know where your mic should be. If you have to do very quick cueing, I would move up to something like a softy, which is this thing, or this is what Rycote calls the super softy. Bumblebee Industries also has a good selection for wind protection for those situations. These will also do very well outdoors and like urban environments. But once you get into windy situations, that's when you want to step up to a Zeppelin with a windjammer or a dead cat, as some people call it.
Stuart and Sky, real fast.
Yeah, when did they become called dead cats? I was always taught
idea.
A hot dog and a fluffy dog.
I have no idea.
Right, because a fluffy dog's alive and a dead cat's dead. So for pet haters,
go ahead, Sky.
Quick point of order. I I called a flaming cat and I got chastised, but Mickey can say dead cat and get away with
Yeah,
it.
yeah, there we go. All right, yeah, all right. Next question.
By stark comparison, I have a Rubik's Cube, a deck of cards, and nail clippers within arm's reach of me. Always listen to Mickey, never listen to me.
Right.
Thomas Bauer from Atlanta says, is there a way to get an ATEM Mini Pro to keep media between power cycles? Have tried save startup state, but that doesn't save media or transition mode, auto instead of cut.
Victor?
No, there isn't. Media is stored in RAM, and so not a flash or an EEPROM. So you do have to save it and load it back in when you do that.
Next question.
Roger Miles from Illinois says, does anyone on the panel use PremierPro on the Mac? Why do you use it rather than FinalCut?
Good, Sky.
Right. I make a living on it, and people hire me to do it.
Go ahead, John.
I use Premiere on both platforms, Windows and Mac. I just found that Premiere on larger project crashes too often, so I moved to DaVinci now.
Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, on a Mac, Premiere, mostly because of the After Effects integration. I do a lot of After Effects work. So,
Jeffrey.
Yeah, I do. I also do PC and Mac, and I also do iPad. So, being able to start in a project on the iPad when you're not by your computer is a great thing to have.
Guy.
It's got a shared compatibility across platform, and it plays well with other tools. And I come from a traditional process of editorial in Hollywood.
Good, Chuck.
Currently been using Premiere on PCs for years, and now that I have a Mac, using it just because I'm familiar with it, but definitely exploring Final Cut, especially the new updates.
You go ahead, Chris.
I was going to say, I did a talk at NAB a couple of years ago talking about how you can capitalize on the strengths of some of the Adobe platform and still use Final Cut. I'll try and find it, put a link in the chat.
Yeah, what we find is generally when people want to work with other folks in the industry, they're using Premiere when they do their own stuff. With social media, we just find that Final Cut's taken over. Like it has to do with the money, it has to do with the ease of use, it has to do with the speed. But we don't, in social media, the only people that we find running Final Cut at this point Premiere at this point are people who think that they're going to get a job somewhere in the industry. But if they're building their own content for their own, we just don't see it very often unless they're doing a lot of After Effects. Next question.
Let's see. Sound Mixer SF Jesse from San Francisco. But hey, Jesse. When it comes to the task of encoding, what are the main differences between a PCI format GPU and a dedicated hardware encoder like an Elemental? And when would you choose one over the other? Also, is there a DIY sort of way to build something like an Elemental?
Go ahead, Stuart.
Firstly, the difference between a GPU and in the cloud with the Elemental, and yes, I looked it up to see it's an Amazon service. GTX cards are limited to 2 transcodes at any one time. Quadro cards are limited to an unlimited number according to how much GPU power you've got. Jeff Cathy will probably know where that becomes a limit in vMix and the like, where you start to limit the number of streams you can output through the hardware codec. I would say the number of streams you need to encode at any one time is what will dictate when you move from a PCI-based GPU encoder up to a cloud-based service or virtual service. The more streams you need, the more likely you're going to need to push it up into the cloud to do more streams at once.
I started streaming from software encoders, like just, basic Wirecast and, lots of other versions of that. I don't do anything other than Zoom here with all of you. I won't use anything other than dedicated hardware encoders at this point. And the reason is I want them to do only one thing, only think about one thing, only have one thing on the system. It's not, an Elemental is still a software encoder. It's a software defined encoder. It's not just doing it with chips. A hardware encoder is like a Makito. And so like that's just using hardware to push it out, even then software on that hardware. But But the Elemental is a software-defined encoder. When you're getting into that hardware, you're dealing with a dedicated pipeline that is designed to do just one thing. The least expensive way to do that is the link. I have one around here somewhere, but the link is $1,000, and it's going to put it into AWS, and then from AWS you can use Media Live to send it to wherever you want. There guys got one there, so that's the least expensive one. The thing with Elementals is they get pretty expensive pretty quickly. After that one, it gets up to like $6 or $10 a piece, and the most expensive one I had for a while. I had two 700s, which we called Ferrari 1 and Ferrari 2 because I could have had two Ferraris. But they handle 4K, and they had up to 16 channels, up to 16 encodes at a time. so I could do a whole conference with one of them. And so the main thing is I find that the software will drop frames, and if I definitely don't want to do it. I definitely don't want my editing package and my encoder to be on the same thing, because the editing package gets asked to do more than it can do, and it's going to push comes to shove, something's going to go. It's either going to start losing frames, or it's going to lose audio sync, or it's going to destabilize and crash. So those are the things that happen, and the ones that are the most susceptible to that, in my opinion, are things like Wirecast and LiveStream. The LiveStream, their hardware is not super stable. And so I think that vMix does a better job at that. I think TriCaster does a better job at that. But even with all of those, I've got some deep scars, and I'm unwilling to encode from an editing package. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. I don't know if anybody.
Miss Alex's transparent Elemental.
My transparent Elemental, yeah, exactly, my little one. So, but a lot of it also has to do with when we do really specialized stuff. Okay, so how do I do, 5.1 encodes? How do I do multi-language? How do I do, and those encoders are all built for that. They're industrial. So I can send 16 channels into an Elemental and pick off the different, and you can do that with software, but it's like, I can just set it all up and it just does the thing with captions and, all the other bits and pieces that I want to do. Anyway, next question.
Anthony Bridgewater from New Jersey says, what are some of the latest options for internet access to live stream literally in the field where a hardline is not available? Mobile hotspots, MoFi. Would like to keep it under $1,000 for the internet access portion of the solution using an ATEM Mini Pro. Sorry if this is recently covered.
It's simple. Buy a live view or rent a live view or a TVU, and that's it. I mean, for $1,000, that budget is way. No, you could rent it for under $1,000. It didn't say you had to buy it, but traffic-wise,
I've never rented a live view for $1,000.
I have. Several times.
You're a reseller from them, though.
Oh,
so
I'm a user, and as a user, you get discounts. But yeah, you definitely can rent one for $1,000. I know a guy that was renting them for $450, and whenever I needed more, I just rent them from them.
When you call, when I call LiveView, the going rate starts at about
no, yeah, sub-rent it for somebody that has one. That's a lot better than going straight from LiveView. But even then, the LiveView Solo is an option, but it's honestly you're still over $1,000 when you start talking about bandwidth and everything too. Bonding and doing transport from the field is not cheap. So if that's your choice, then don't.
If you are trying to do it, like if that's the cap and you can't do it, and I agree with Jeff that I wouldn't try to do it for $1,000. I mean, for a show that I'm working on, where we've done some tests that admittedly were successful, but I'm still too scared to do it, is using a Zixi encode across a MiFi that has very strong. Now that took some work. We knew which MiFi to get. That had the best bandwidth. We were testing at 15 to 20 megs a second. It's got a lot of latency. It's got a lot of jitter. It's got a lot of those things. And Zixi kind of blends through all of that. Just kind of pushes through all of that to get it to the internet. I would.
But you're on one provider, though. You're on one cellular provider with a MiFi.
I understand. I'm saying that if
that's your limit
inside of the price point that was given in the question, that's how I would do it. Is a Zixi encode through a MiFi to answer that question. Would I use it on my own production? Probably not. Stuart and then Chris.
I'm going to go with a low budget option, which is assuming that everything else in the production chain is already creating the stream for you, and all you need to do is actually access the internet. I would look at a Netgear MR2100, which is a 4G router. They're also doing 5G ones pretty soon, but Netgear are a little iffy on their firmware updates. I use the MR1100 when I'm out at racetracks and what have you, and it hooks into the 4G network and no problem. The other option is Uray or Uray Vision. There's different versions. They're the people who everybody's generic HDMI to IP boxes are basically copies of or under licensed versions of. They do a Wi-Fi and 4G connected version. So if it's a one camera, you can go either HDMI or SDI out straight into the 4G and upload. Beyond that, maybe wait for the ATEM and the ATEM Mini bridge or the streaming bridge.
I'll be really interested to see what protocol they use for that. Beiju?
That's RTSP and SRT. There's actually a teardown video of somebody building their own based on a Raspberry Pi. And they've been able to stream from the ATEM Mini Pro to the Raspberry Pi, and the output stream is just RTSP.
Right, so they're not using, but are they using SRT? Or they're not using SRT?
I would actually have to go and watch the video again to check.
I don't,
I'll find the video. I'll put a link in the chat.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that was Aaron's video, I think. And I would say if you're on a budget, avoid streaming directly off the Mini Pro, stream off a laptop. And if you need to use something like Connectify to bond a phone connection and a MiFi, so you have at least two connections, and stream SRT rather than RTMP. So you have a little bit of error correction. You can put a delay of about maybe a couple of seconds and then restream it out either using Amazon AWS, Wowza, or some other service, basically. So you get a little bit more robustness. But at that budget, it's difficult.
It won't work all the time, or most of the time. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Since he's not saying anything about it being portable, having a good antenna booster is always a helpful thing, so you can get that antenna really high.
Go ahead, Chris.
I was going to first of all say I want to celebrate this moment of Alex Lindsay actually defending the guy's budget of $1,000 to Jeff. I thought that was admirable of you, Alex, in a moment that
so one of the things I'm trying to
mark this day on our calendars. And then the other question
one of the things I'm trying to focus on. So if someone says I want to do it inside of this price, I'm trying to say, if you say at any price or you don't give me a price, I will give you an expensive solution. If you say I want to do it inside of $1,000, my little box is how do I figure out how to do it?
I knew you say that, Alex, but most of the time you actually don't do that. You're like,
I'm working on it.
Here's a way to do it.
I'm working on it. I'm working on it. All right, next.
Well, I want to celebrate that. And real quickly, what actually physically is a live view that you guys are talking about? I'm pretending I'm the dumb guy in the room.
There's multiple models, everything from a small Solo, which is kind of the prosumer version, that is 2 modems. So you're bonding 2 modems together, along with a landline if you have that. And then it goes up to like the newest LiveView 800. It's more of a backpack, and it has 4 video inputs, and it can actually bond, I think, up to 10 modems.
That's what I needed to see is pictures.
Well, and then you can get an extender for it, which so you can get up to, I think the most we ever had active was 14 modems on them, with the extender. And so what's also really good is if you keep track of it, so the LiveView will give you a bunch of data back. And you get really good at knowing what modems are good at in different cities, because you're getting a bunch of data that's there. Anyway, go ahead. Next question.
Let's move on. Sky says, I'm just teasing you about the budget thing, Alex. ReStream versus StreamYard. I was surprised by Beauty Bubble that StreamYard is a mashup of Zoom and Canva in a cloud-based service. Does ReStream also have a multi-participant layout and switching ability?
Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yes, it does, and it's ever changing. Last time I was on it, they added a feature where you could have all the participants in a 4-plex box or side by side, as in the thin
and vertical. This is ReStream or Stream?
This is ReStream. I'm sorry, this is ReStream. Yes, and so it's ever changing is the bottom line. Last time I used StreamYard, it was pretty decent. The reason why I used StreamYard was because the way I was streaming only allowed for StreamYard, not ReStream.
I was just very surprised. I thought I was just going to be using it to distribute it to multiple distribution channels. And then she taught me all of these other features that are cloud-based that I would have thought I would have only been able to do on hardware. It was kind of magical.
There's I know a lot of corporations that are using StreamYard for that. And a lot of it has to do with they wanted to run presentations. They want to have two-way communication. They want to stream it to a bunch of locations. They want to manage all the chat. It's more, I believe it's more mature than ReStream when it comes to that the interactive presentation tools are more robust or more mature in StreamYard than they are in ReStream. ReStream is very good at, it's moving into that industry because everyone wants to pivot that direction, but it's not, I don't think it's mature in that area. StreamYard also can stream to LinkedIn. So if you have an account that's approved, I don't think ReStream can do that. Go ahead, Colin.
You covered most of it. I guess, Sky, when we were talking about this the other day, you were asking about how to stream to multiple targets, and that's ReStream's primary business. I would consider StreamYard for, a call-in show kind of environment, to do something like that very conveniently, over ReStream's solution, just because ReStream is newer at that particular business. But in your case, I would just go with OBS or whatever you're doing for your local switching, because you sir are a professional.
All right.
Sir, yes, sir.
Next question.
Chris Russo from Red Hook says, I hear Jeff Francis is using the Symmetrix voice processor. What does the voice symmetry button do? Does he use it? And does voice symmetry processing exist in other hardware and plugins?
Jeff.
So am I using the button? Well, I am. It is in now, and I will now turn voice symmetry off, and then I will turn voice symmetry back on. Did that make a difference to anyone? No, what is voice symmetry? Some audio signals are asymmetric, meaning the positive and negative sides of the waveform are different amplitudes. Voice symmetry is, I believe, something called phase rotation, which actually does a different amount. It does phase shift across the audio spectrum so that it tries to move different portions of the audio different amount of time to make the peaks not all land in the same place. So if all the frequencies in my voice are hitting a peak at the same time, by slipping different frequencies by different amounts, then they will peak at slightly different times and hopefully not be audibly different. I know that Isotope has a phase tool. So they have a thing called adaptive phase rotation in Isotope, and I think Waves also has something like this. So symmetry is something like phase rotation. Remember that if you do a time delay, you get a different amount of phase angle lag at every frequency. So this is doing the same phase lag at every frequency, so it's a different time at every frequency. That was really complex.
Good. It was really good. It was a really good answer. I don't think any of us need to go any further, but it's a fantastic question answer.
And great use of this little switcher and zooming in on the picture. All the panelists should take note. That's how you answer a question.
Yeah, absolutely.
Rick Combs says, using Wirecast for our church streaming, everything is going along fine at about 15% CPU level. As soon as we throw up a Bible verse, all text, CPU usage goes to about 75%. Using a picture graphic, it stays at about 15%. What is causing this?
I wonder if it's keyed. If the Bible graphic, so my guess is the Bible graphic is keyed over it rather than a full screen, and that it may be a higher resolution than, so a higher base resolution rather than inside of the resolution that you're streaming at. So if you remember, if you're streaming at 1920 by 1080, or say 1280 by 720, and you put a 4K image in there, and then you scale it down and key it, that's a lot of work for them. Scaling is the thing that just really uses up a lot of CPU power or GPU power. So you want to be very careful of not scaling your images if you don't have to. And that's my guess. I don't know for sure. Go ahead, John. Can't hear you, John.
Mute.
Oh, sorry. Wirecast just scares the hell out of me. However, the The one thing that we did to minimize the CPU usage, and Jeffrey can add additional color on this as well, I'm sure. Make sure your thumbnails are turned off. So you can have those turned on video or turned off as static. And that saved a tremendous amount of CPU power for us in our tests.
Because it's scaling. Scaling that image down to that thumbnail. Chris?
I'm wondering if it has anything to do with the fact that, and I don't know anything about Wirecast, but he says that once he puts the text up, is it something about drawing all that text? Is it?
I don't think it's a text. I mean, I think it could be.
My question is
it
live?
It's not drawing the text. It's just an image.
What he's saying is that if he puts up text,
all text,
he's having to anti-alias it and do a whole bunch more processing than he would have
Yes.
to just put up an image. And that's
so it'd be interesting to create the images as a freeze frame where it's not live editable text and see if you have the same result. If you do, I don't know.
Well, I think that's what he said. He when he put up an image, it's much lower.
Using a picture graphic, it stays at about 15%.
I think it's the rendering. I would put up an image that is the same resolution as an image built at the same resolution as your stream with a key and see if that has a different effect. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
The biggest problem is we don't know where these sources are coming from. If the graphics graphic or the text or the video is coming from another device. So I'd be curious as to how he's bringing the text in to overlay, because that can also be an issue if you've got a machine. Let's say you've got a Dell laptop that's running a 4K monitor or something like that. That's, once again, you're talking about what you just said, where you're oversizing the text and then bringing it down to 720 or whatever.
Yep. Next question.
I'd also like to point out that we're only 75% usage. There's still another 25 to go.
No, you should not do a stream. If you're using Wirecast, do not go over 55%, in my opinion. Like if you see it bouncing over 55%, you have a problem.
I'm not saying the glass is half empty. I'm saying the glass is too big. Scott Rothheiser says, what are Sky and Alex using for their backgrounds?
I think we're both using the same thing. Lazulite. It's a Lazulite gray screen. You can get it'll be gray and it'll be white or black on the back, or green or blue, but gray is all I care about. I'm using a 6x7 to make sure that it was big enough to do it. They make them in a couple different sizes. Sky, are you using the same size?
Correct, exactly the same size per your recommendation, because I was using the camera off of the PowerBook and it has a much wider lens than my what I'm using now.
Right, and mine's a solid 4 feet behind me, so it's the 6x7. That's why
mine's a solid 8 inches.
Right. Yeah. So, but that's why you'll see a little bit of shadowing from his and not as much from mine, because it's the further distance back. That's why I got a really big one. But you can get them in different sizes. I bought a lot of them. They seem to be the easiest one to throw up quickly. It does. The 6x7 take, it's like one of those car ones where you twist it to get it to, but the 6x7 is a thing. I had to roll one up last week, and it was like, it's, you have to think about it a little bit, but outside of that, it's
wrestling an octopus. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Next question. Are you there, Chris? Chris, you're a lot quieter than we remember you.
Quieter as in muted. Is that what you're trying to say?
I didn't want to make any decisions or jump. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I was giving you the symptom, which was that you're quieter.
Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed that the screen wasn't changing, and I just tried to barrel through hoping everything was working. Good morning. Does anyone have any experience with Evenium, online platform for polling and Q&A? A client wants to use it in an upcoming webcast, and I would love some feedback.
Anyone know that one? I haven't.
It on this screen.
There's a lot of them coming out. This is not one that I'm familiar
pretty
with.
Pictures.
But we'll research.
Pretty cool.
They have a lot of pretty pictures. Yeah, I haven't seen it.
This looks like it might be the second best Q&A platform on the planet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't know. I don't have an answer, and it doesn't look like anybody else has used it. So if you use it, our request is that you come back and tell us what you think of it, what you like and what you don't like. Next question.
Ruth Hernandez from the Bronx says, do any of your clients ever request a written transcription of the audio on recorded video? All of them. If so, what software and or hardware do you use? Of course, budget is a consideration.
For years, and still when we do complex ones that are high profile and we have to get them done, you know, and make sure that they're absolutely correct, we use a company called Production Transcripts in LA. It doesn't seem to be any limit to the amount of stuff that I can send them, and I get it back in a day. It's not cheap, but I get it. I send it down to them, and I'll send down 90 sessions on Monday, and Wednesday have all of them back in text, and they're accurate with time code. And you know, like it's just there. It's a giant machine that does that. So there, and there's a lot of people that do it, but that's the one that has been the kind of our workhorse for a long time. I will say that for most things, I don't find anything more than something like simonsays.ai. I throw it into my timeline, I push it up there, it comes back with text, and it's not as accurate, but it's integrated with my edit, which is really nice, and it's a lot less expensive. Go ahead, Bill.
I was going to say exactly the same thing. It's a workflow extension inside Final Cut 10, so it's always there, and
it works in Premiere, and it's not just Final Cut. It's Premiere and Resolve and I believe Avid and everything else. It's not only limited to Final Cut. We know it as a Final Cut extension, and in full, Mike Matzdorf, who was on Saturday, works on it. So in full disclosure, he's connected to the product. So, but Mike, from a workflow perspective, having him touching the product also is part of why I use it, because I just trust his judgment. Go ahead, Chris.
I talked to a producer once who was talking about using custom music for various videos. And I said, do you find that you always have enough budget to do that? And he said, well, why not? Why wouldn't I spend the money? Because I'm just going to mark it up to my client. And the reason I tell this story anecdotally is that most of the times you can turn that around and you can charge people back for it. And if they want an accurate transcript, we have a really good relationship with a local transcriber that we use all the time. And like your LA reference, Alex, we get stuff back really quick. I don't know about as much as what you're doing, but
it's the network. So what you're paying for when you do that, or when you send it in, it's a network of people all over the world or all over the US that are able to handle it. And for production transcripts, they only do English and Spanish. There are a couple other ones. There's another organization that does a lot of this, is rev.com. That's a lot less expensive, and that's still people doing it, and they do it in lots of languages. And I gotta say, we were using another service, the service that we'd always used for a long time for international work. And our bill using rev.com, this is, we want to do it. We want to do 70 sessions in, I think, 8 languages, I think was what we were doing. And I think our bill dropped from, I want to say $18,000 or $20,000, maybe a little over 20 grand, to like $1,500 or $2,000. And I didn't notice any difference in the quality. So rev.com is another one that is a really good source for that kind of thing. Sky, and then Bill.
TEMI. I don't know how you pronounce that, but I've been using that. It uses basically the exact same interface under the hood as Rev, but it's very functional, and you can do some time code shifting to make it work inside. I still would rather use Logger.
Bill?
The best of the automated ones, you still have to go in and proofread, because no matter how sophisticated a AI system is, you have things like there, and there spelled 3 different ways, and you're going to get those little anomalies, even if it's doing great. So if you can get human beings involved, you can demand a level.
And as an aside, Rev is human. Like that's not AI. Rev,
I wasn't.
Simon Says is auto. And when you're paying extra, when you're paying more money, you're paying for someone to do it and then someone to read it and correct it before you get it. So it's gone through 2, sometimes 3 rounds of revision before you see it. And that's oftentimes what our clients want to pay for, because they never want to see it again. Like they want to do it once and then have it be correct. Go ahead, Mickey. And we're going to go a little heavy because our next conversation won't take a whole hour. Go ahead.
Yeah, for a large majority of the productions that I work on that require transcriptions, they have us send the production sound files to Transcript Associates. It's another option you guys might want to look into.
Absolutely. And Kev?
Hi, yes, there's a mention of a cheap budget going on here. Microsoft Word last week have just released an update to their Office Online where you're able to basically speak directly to your screen and it'll transcribe what you say. Now, it's a really dirt cheap method. I suppose you could play back in a microphone or channel into the computer where your Office is running, and it might well just transcribe directly that way. It's just a cheap option. May not work, but it's
the hardest problem.
It's free.
The hardest problem with voice activated, because Apple's had that for quite some time, and I don't know how it relates to it. Even Dragon is punctuation. You know, it's knowing where the punctuation is, and so you get when I'm dictating to my Mac or whatever.
If you full stop, new line, it will take all that information along. But
no, but I'm saying if you're just taking a seminar, if someone's just talking, if you're dictating to it, that totally makes sense. If someone's just talking to it, a lot of times I find that the punctuation is not as good. Next question.
Tony Mobley again says, Alex, which version of MiMo Live are you using?
I am using version 5.7 right now.
I am on 5.8 B4.
I think I just haven't updated it. I mean, I just didn't run the update yet.
Whoa.
There was a lot of things changes between 5.7 and 5.8.
James Babbitt says, on the office hours panel, how are you using a teleprompter? Do you use it as a monitor?
Go ahead, Guy.
Yeah, I have one. You can kind of see my view here. Chris, look at the camera, Chris. Yeah, so I have Chris right now pinned dead center. And then to the left, I have the gallery view. And to the right, I have the teleprompter view. So sometimes I'll go full screen this way, and it's just how you depends on how you want to feel, like this is like I'm really looking at the group here. I feel like I'm hanging with my buddies at a restaurant or something. But sometimes I want to see the questions up ahead or read them as they're being read. So I'll click on this view here. So that's how I use it. I don't know.
I think we could do a whole second hour on how people set up their
office hours
monitors and their to do this. I think we could do that. That'd be
Someone put it in the second hour. Well, we're going to talk about second hours later this hour. So we'll put
we could do a second hours on second hours.
We are going to do a second hour. It's actually today. All right.
Okay.
Next question.
And Ricky Gore from Nashville, Tennessee says, I'm using Wirecast to start an event. It runs a single slide and music. This is just a placeholder while getting presenters set up in Vimeo Studio live stream. Then we just go live and it takes over the stream. Is this a safe practice? I haven't had any issues so far. It's a clean switch too.
Go ahead, Colin.
It's a perfectly safe practice. Wirecast might be a little overpowered for that use. I mean, you could do that with OBS at no cost. You could do that with Cam Twist if you wanted to. If you're really just doing a single slide in audio, but yeah, it's a perfectly safe use. Sure.
Next question.
Well, we have two more over here. Here we go. Sorry. Mr. Shadwell says, how did Guy get the questions to show like that?
If you're in the panel, we sent you a link that tells you what the next questions are. And so there's a link in the chat for the panel to go up and look at the next questions that are in the queue.
All right.
That's how he saw that. Yep.
And then
next question.
Sky says, what is the office hour brain trust's thoughts about the NFL TV presentation with crowd noise experience? Go Seahawks. No, you don't have to say go Seahawks. Thanks, Guy.
Jeff?
I watched a little bit, but I'll be honest with you. I felt it was very disjointed. It was a good try, but it looks fine. It sounded fine as long as you were down on the field. Then as soon as they tilted up a little bit or took a wide beauty shot or something like that, it just was like, wow, that's fake.
Yeah, I agree with you. I had the exact same feeling. I wanted to see what they were doing. So I watched a couple minutes. Steelers aren't playing until today, so it didn't matter to me. So I was like kind of wandering around and looking at it. And And I noticed that as long as it was on the field, as Jeff said, I was totally fine. And then as soon as they cut to a wide, it never worked for me again. Like it was just like it at that point, it was like I couldn't get it out of my head that there was that and I knew that it was fake. I mean, I've been interviewing people about that audio insert, so I knew it was fake. It just, there was something about my brain just wasn't able to unlatch it once it saw it. Go ahead, John.
Nope. Too many mutes, Mr.
I
Pareto.
clicked it double twice today. Jeffrey posted some stuff about this in Discord. I found it comforting. We have performers that are performing online now, like magicians. And if there's no music or clap track underneath them, it's really disconcerting. And so I'm real comfortable with what the NFL and NHL both are doing with the tracks.
And soccer leagues, Premier Soccer League is doing the same thing.
I think we're going to find that some people do it better than others, and there's going to be like talented, like in demand. I'm the guy who sits there and plays.
There
the
already
keyboard.
is. Well, they've made a
really.
They've already made a play for that. Yeah, there's I forget what they termed it in the NFL, but it was like crowd noise specialist or something like that.
And it's not like they're just playing cloud noise. They've got like a Novation, sequencer. So it's one of those little pads, and they're hitting the different things of like this kind of sound and that kind of sound and cheers. And it's not like just a track. They're really got it dialed in. Go ahead, Stuart.
I'm going to go with the shots fired comment of real footballers don't wear pads.
There you go. Jeffrey.
Just to clarify what's happening here is with the NFL, they're trying to get the players into the game a little bit more, so they're pushing 70 dB worth of crowd noise into it. Now, what's happening? What I saw is the game that I watched, which of course was the Packers versus the Vikings, was the fact that whenever anybody got a touchdown or a play that was controversial, there was no crowd change. Like the crowd wasn't even watching the game if you just took the stands out of the whole thing. So, and then I watched the Bears and the Lions game afterwards, and they did a little bit better on that, where they kind of favored the crowd on one end or the other. I don't know how much they can do on that too, but the other thing that was missing very noticeably was the music and things that would get people cheered up. Like for instance, when Packers go to the Lambeau Field, you're going to have that "Go Pack Go" chant, and you're going to expect it, and it's not going to be there unless somebody thinks about it. And if they can do it, if the NFL allows them to do that type of stuff.
I mean, I think that's the hard part, is that in Lambeau Field, which I've actually worked in, and also in Heinz Field, and definitely in the Seahawks, the way the fields are built, the way that they sit, everything else, the fans have a huge impact, and I think it actually puts a lot of those teams at a disadvantage. I know it puts the Steelers at a disadvantage, because our fans are crazy, and so they, and really use up every ounce of no one can talk the next day, kind of thing. And so I think that it's going to be really interesting to see how the whole season goes. Roscoe.
I blame I Love Lucy for putting a laugh track when there was no studio audience.
Go ahead, Colin.
It struck me as, right. It struck me as watching a bad 80s sitcom with a horrible laugh track. And the thing is, as soon as you see the stands, like, this is not right.
Right.
You get pulled right out of it. I think, to John's point, different types of entertainment get different value from an audience track, whether it be a laugh track or noise or whatever. Magicians, yes, they need music. Comedians vary. The comedians who are used to doing large events in arenas find it very disconcerting to do comedy online. Comedians who do small parties of 200 people or less are able to adjust more effectively to it. I don't know. I don't think that it's required in sports.
Well, and I think that we're going to see that in general, of different types of people doing different, able to handle it. A lot of times we say, well, we shouldn't do it because that's not the way people did it in the past, and we see that a lot with work. Like, working from home is going to be different than working at, it is. And for some people it's better, and for some people it's worse. Same with school. School is, there's some kids that can't handle going to school at home, but there's a lot of kids that didn't do very well going to school. Like showing up, they're better at home than they were. So it's just going to adjust, who is in the pole position. Doesn't mean who wins, but who's in the pole position based on the change of venue. Go ahead, Bill, and then Brian.
Sound is so motivational that it really worries me, though, that rather than the organic sound of a crowd who's reacting to real time, you're going to have somebody probably employed by the team, probably the home team, who's going to be determining level, amount of cheering, and all the rest of that. And I'm wondering if in the long run that couldn't literally change the player dynamics on the field.
The funny thing, though, is that, like, I know at least for Steeler games, I don't think they could tape or play back reasonably what Steeler fans say when there's a bad call, because it's not safe for work. I think that they have to. You can sometimes hear it in the national broadcasts because we're pretty outspoken.
Bill's
Brian,
point
and
is
Sky.
actually once a Bill's point.
Hands.
Sorry.
Brian, and then Sky.
What struck us was when halftime came on and you're in the studio, the background behind all the guys was a stadium full of people sitting and moving around. And so the disconnect of seeing the game one way and then the halftime show, like they were saying, everything's fine, was just really weird for us. And then the other thing is some NHL did is they got their sounds from the NHL games. And so whatever two teams were playing, you still had the goal music for Chicago. And even though they're all playing in Edmonton, and that's
actually happened in a couple sports. They went back to EA or other folks and pulled and got the audio from those individuals, because they'd spent all that trouble recording all of it, and they couldn't do it again. You can't. The funny thing was they couldn't go to a stadium and record it because you can't bring anybody into the stadium. So some of these records, they had to go to what they had already spent an enormous amount of time and effort from the game companies to do all these records and bring them back in. Go ahead, Sky.
Well, speaking of game, it did kind of feel like when I was a child looking at that football thing on the vibrator, where you turn the vibrator on and all the people started moving around. The other thing was when MASH, of course, went to a laugh track, it changed the dynamic of your viewing experience, and it did feel kind of fake. As somebody mentioned about, we should be listening to the players on the field. Well, like you said, then you've got the challenge of how do you mute that quickly enough and the delay. But I did see that Fox is what was presented the Seahawks yesterday, and they did do the advertisements for the WWE, and I saw all of the images or the screen things up on the back. I don't want to go there. No, thank you.
Chuck, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to agree that the continuity, I think, is what took me out of it. When they were close up on the field and we had kind of the rumble and the stuff of the crowd, it was okay. It felt odd, but as soon as the continuity changed, you're absolutely right. It just took you out of it. And I don't know if they could do it for every game. I think that eventually for the Super Bowl or something, they might have sort of the fan-led app that played the sounds. I know that people were working on that. Possibly that might be something to have the fan generate recorded EA Sports or something like that sound effects to respond to the players and see how they react and how we react at home.
I want to do a Zoom wave. Zoom wave.
Hands. John Preto.
So, hey Jeff, weren't you and Grant working on how to manage the crowd noise with Tony Robbins' deal? And I know that Microsoft is paying the NFL and the NBA to have teams, on the backside of the court. And you think it's too much of a dumpster fire to have those guys feed that into real-time audio?
The biggest issue is you're using formats that aren't, or transport solutions such as Zoom or Teams. They're already doing too much auto mixing to make it viable. So it needs to be something more, and we're working on something that's more of a point-to-point WebRTC or something that's carrying the audio in a point-to-point that you could then truly mix it. But you're talking about needing the capability of mixing literally possibly hundreds, if not thousands, of audio channels. That's pretty scalable.
And to Bill's point earlier is, I think that one of the challenges the broadcast is going to have, I think broadcast is in a lot of trouble. I'll flat out say, I think the broadcast as we know it is in deep, deep trouble. And the reason is that a lot of their stuff feels more manufactured. So the two big places that broadcast still as competitive as in news and sports, and the sports feel really painful to watch for me. You know, I'm going to be interested to see. I have time to watch like a half an hour of the Steeler game, so I'll watch a little bit to see how it feels as a real fan. But I feel like it's feeling manufactured. The stuff we see on TV feels, you know, either underproduced or manufactured. I think that there's a lot of disconnect between, you know, large portions of the country with different news organizations. And so you have this whole like ripping apart that's happening for broadcast. At the same time, you have things that are coming up from the bottom, like what, you know, that are less expensive to produce, like what we're doing every morning together. And we're going to see more and more of this as people realize that. I think we're going to move, and I've said this over and over and over again, away from big events and more towards constant events, you know, where where brands and organizations are constantly doing stuff. So that's all coming up through that system. And then on the top end, they're competing with streaming, which they can't compete with. They can't compete with Apple and Netflix and Amazon and everyone else, because they're paying anywhere from $75,000 to $250,000 a minute. And you just can't, they can't play in that sport. And so I think that broadcast is just getting pushed between those two really hard. And I think it'll be, the longer this situation lasts, the less viable the platform is going to be. And it's not that it'll go away. It's just that it'll be mortally wounded. it'll be like Baltimore, you know, like for about like 3 or 4 seasons of just kind of not dead, but not really alive either. I think I truly believe that's kind of where it's going at the moment. And they just don't have the money to keep up. Yep, Chris.
I still think there's a viable, when it comes to the audience thing, I think there's a viable discussion to have around audience bubbles for game shows, talent shows, and possibly even sporting events. Where you
the big thing
where,
though is
where you take 500 people and you say, look, you're sequestered, you live in this hotel, you're not going to get sick. Your only job is to go here and be in a crowd.
Oh, I see. They pay them.
And I think you could find a bunch of people that are unemployed, right? And you could pay them enough to make, you know, and you could say, look, in the off hours, you guys can do whatever you want. It'll be the frat house of the century, but you can't leave. You do, and you self-police. You have the kids self-police. Hey, he left the building, you know, and now all of a sudden I get a bonus because I ratted somebody out. But their only job is to go to these TV shows, go to these sporting events. And just like the NBA has the bubble where, look, we're all staying here, we're all staying healthy. You have an audience bubble. They're fake really people that just sit.
Fake people. They're real. They're
real people that have one job, and that is to cheer and if they don't, they get fired.
Right.
Well, that's actually a great thing for the Salvation Army home, like in San Francisco. You have families that are.
They can't look like homeless people. They got to look like you know.
These aren't homeless people. They're just don't have a home.
Displaced.
Yeah. Go ahead, Stuart.
I'm pretty sure that's homeless, but okay.
I would definitely like to see the horror movie that those people locked in that would make, Chris. I think that would be funny to see what they do in their off hours. The other thing is, you could also ship them around the country and go into local businesses that have already been quarantined to have them put in different appearances for like which team they're barracking for that day. But I would also like to point out
I feel like
that
we're devolving into. Go ahead.
For motorsport, this is a moot question. The only time you ever hear the noise is before the race, after the race, or if Ferrari is in the lead at Imola. They're the only time you'll hear the crowd in motorsport.
We started talking about trucking people around, and then it's like bees. It's like bees, and taking them to the different fields that they have to do.
I think the audience bubble is viable.
So here's my prediction: tennis and golf will have a massive resurgence because they don't have to worry about crowd noise. But no, to Chris's point, and here's the elitist approach: take all the season ticket holders and ship them around the country as the teams play, and because those people are most likely to be able to work remotely anyway.
Go ahead, Kev. This is it. We'll move on.
It turns out the BBC have already solved the problem. They've now worked out a method of being able to use an audience like ours on Zoom and invite them into a live recording of their radio programs. And they've just done, I think this weekend, the very first live television game show involving a distance audience in studio, and the vast majority, like 200, I believe, are going to be live interacting on Zoom. And they seem to have solved the problem of latency and delay. And hearing it back, I heard it the other week on their radio, which they've been testing it on the radio news quiz program. It works. It sounds like a genuine audience is in there. And of course, the stand-up comedians are getting that immediate feedback. I've just been trying to look for some information on the BBC website to see if I could
Yeah, I
find
think
some background, but I've got a link
I think
to
America's
the program.
I think America's Funniest Videos just recently, you know, they've been experimenting with that. So it's something that, you know, that we're definitely seeing more of that.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Sky.
Well, central casting sends a lot of audience members into, and I know Roscoe has probably participated in a live studio audience experience where the front man is telling you when to laugh and when to not laugh and how hard to laugh, and that's a part of the game on pre-recorded episodes. You've got a paid audience, if nothing else, in food. They'll feed you because you're there for 6 hours. You get potty breaks, maybe. Oh, Roscoe says you didn't even get potty breaks. Oh, well, that's a harsh show.
I think that one of the things that we are going to see some more experimentation with is the audience being more involved in the actual show from home. So maybe it's not their voice, but, and I've told this story before, but I'm not, and so I won't belabor it, but you know, we connected people's emojis, the use of emojis, to a flamethrower for a Facebook Live, and it, you know, we didn't know that Facebook could handle 140,000 interactions a minute, so and just barely, you know, and so, but it is, people got really excited. So giving people, I think that there's a new kind of sport or new kind of entertainment where the fans are actually changing what's going on the, you know, on the field, you know, or affecting it. It can be them cheering, but I think there's a whole nother set of things where the fans actually feel like they're part of the game. And I think that could be really, you know, really interactive, and really create a lot of carpal tunnel. You know, as we go down that path, people hitting their like this, like trying to move something around, or you know, getting excited about it. Yeah, Hunger Games. People were like, you know, it won't be Hunger Games. We're not going to have, you know, that's. We watched that with my kids, and I was like, where did they ever come up with a book about kids killing kids? I was like, that is like not a, like, why are we watching this anyway? So okay, so that's it for our first hour. We ran really heavy. One of the things I wanted to talk about as I'm kind of in a just thinking about it, is really just getting people's feedback on the second hours. What's working, what people would like to see more of, less of. Go ahead, Phil.
Yeah, I think I'd love to see, we got a lot of experts here and a lot of people with specialties, a lot of interesting backgrounds, and I'd love to see more sort of presentations by panelists, by and sort of, you know, edited, of course, by you to keep it in the genre that we're talking about, but you know, have them maybe publicly or offline pitch you, you know, a TED talk of what they'd like to talk about, and and present more stuff. And that's one idea. My second idea is somewhat tangential, that we all collectively have a broad network of friends and work acquaintances that I think could be interesting to bring in.
Yep.
And perhaps, like, for example, I've got a really great friend who does special effects and motion pictures, and maybe I bring him on and I interview him. And so it might alleviate some burden from you, you know, so that kind of a thing where, you know, Fenwick brings in a friend or Colin brings in a friend who might be interesting. My point is, you know, we've got a broad group here, and put some of the burden of the content on us.
Yep. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, within this group we have like a lot of really talented, mostly technical people. I'd love to get in like people from the production side of things, the producers, I don't know, even production accountants, to get to know their side of the show as well. Like, even down to, you know, learn even Teamsters, what they deal with every day. How can we make their work easier? Stuff like that. Even catering. What the heck? Other people aside from technical people.
Yep, absolutely. Jeffrey?
I was thinking about the coffee, the education stuff, and the coffee videos, and the continuation of how that's going to play out. And the one problem that we did have with those coffee videos was there were so many packed into 1 hour. You had to go on the second hour, and of course your voice went. So then we ended up going from Sunday to Monday on that. So it
No, and
went
to
a little.
be specific, we went Sunday to Monday because we weren't streaming on Sunday. I didn't want to stream on Sunday.
Well, yeah. But the point being is there was a lot of information that was stuffed into that hour. Instead of having it done that way, maybe it's more of a spread out type situation where on Saturdays we spend about an hour and we only bring in 2 or 3, and so we can have a good spirited discussion on those videos, and then maybe even just switch it up. So because we're talking video, what about audio only productions? What about no audio productions? What about things like that? But then it becomes a dedicated hour where there's a technique that might be even applied. So the next set of coffee videos will have a noir look to it, and it could just keep going on a weekly basis, and we have more than enough content for that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that we could definitely just go, well, we'll go through as many as we get to every Saturday, and not have it be like we trying to get through all of them, and we just go at the pace that we go at. Like we might get to 3 of them, we might get to 8 of them. It just depends on how much feedback people have. So I think that makes sense. I think that I probably wouldn't use the goal is to really figure out what the intended outcome is. I think that for education, we don't want to try to make it an artsy thing as much as you can make it artsy, but not make it like I'm going to change a bunch of formats for it. But really, how do we make it the most educational or the most, I think sometimes we can get distracted by a lot of other things. But I want to do more challenges, and obviously the coffee challenge was Pixel Core in its day had probably 5 or 6 challenges running at the same time. Like they were just constantly running, and they were overlapped and everything else. But it was much larger. So part of it gets into, and this gets back into like how many people are active. And so as an aside, when we talk about challenges, I'm measuring how many people are active and how many people are going to participate when I decide how many of those to do. Because otherwise we end up with, we start stretching. It's like, too little jam over too much bread. And so we just have to be very careful of not, we can get excited and start adding lots of things, and then just there's not as much participation. So, I think that some of this comes down to, as we grow the size of the group, when we're seeing, 500 or 1,000 people coming every morning, there's a whole different set of things that I'll do, but at the current number, there's a certain, I just stay in something that I think will be constantly oversubscribed. But I do get your point. I think that more challenges would be fun.
Then with what you just said, then the coffee challenges should be our art house type challenges. But then if you're talking on education side, it should be a challenge that is about education, that puts it more towards like, for instance, how to solve a math problem, or how to talk between 2 students or something like that.
I think that though the thing is that the challenge really is to think. The reason that I don't view the coffee challenge as an art house challenge. I view it as an educational challenge, because we have to figure out methodologies to do training. I think I posted something in the thing. I don't know if everyone saw the little TikTok that I did of the woman singing the there on it. But really thinking about the point of the coffee challenge is really about how much data can we comfortably pack into a minute. It's and then have it be something that you walk away from. It's definitely, because math, there's a whole bunch of people that aren't going to be interested in math. But the reason I picked coffee was because we all do it, coffee or tea, and so it's something that is generally shared among all of us. But the idea is to use it as trying to find that quintessential solution of people being able to walk away totally understanding how to do a thing, and because I think that right now there's just a lot of solutions that aren't, that aren't fully formed. And so the idea was to keep it simple, and it's a simple operation that almost all of us do. We can do it with our phone. And how do we, but do we start adding graphics, and do we start adding other things, and for us to all think about that process? But it's definitely not it's much less a video project than it is a educational product. Go ahead, Colin.
I'm not sure why you'd discount math. I would think as an academic process, the point would be to take a particularly dry subject and make it engaging.
It is. It's just that there's a vast majority of our users that won't participate.
I don't
That's
know
all I'm
why
looking
you
at.
would think that.
Okay.
I'm not sure what
We'll
you
do a
base
math
it on,
challenge.
but,
We'll
yeah.
see. We'll do a math challenge, and we'll see how many people show up. I just think that the thing is that everybody makes coffee or tea, or 95%, except for John Preto. But 95% of our audience does it. A lot of people will. I don't think that there'll be as much. I was looking at something that's generally shared across all of those things. Now, I will say that when I think about how to do education, I mostly think about math. Because I think that it's a relatively straightforward thing to use, because it's a relatively objective. But the so I think that math is a good example. I just and we will. I mean, I definitely think I would love for us to do a Pythagorean theorem.
That of course was
where,
my thinking, right? You could do
Oh yeah, so
Pythagoras, or you could do some other trig example using maps or something. There are all sorts of use cases that are real
And
world use cases.
And it's geared more towards the education side rather than
Right.
others.
Yeah.
But again, what I'm trying to do with education is not look at it as K through 12 or university or anything else. It's really about the process of teaching a thing, and so that's why I picked something that everybody has their own version of, that they can show. Anyway, so we'll move on from that subject, but we'll keep on coming back to it. I mean, I definitely want to do a lot more in that area. I think that it's going to be important. We'll see what happens tomorrow, but I think it's important for us to think again about photogrammetry and USDZ and those things. I think that those are about to, maybe not tomorrow and maybe not this fall, but those are going to be super important subject matters within the next year. It's super important that people understand how to use 3D in ways that they haven't used it in the past, because it's about to become a really big deal. AR is bigger than the phone. I promise. It's like I have seen the future. And it's like looking into the sun. So it's important for us to figure out how to generate content for that market. Anyway, go ahead, Chris. Can't hear you. Still can't hear you.
Okay. Did you see that in the invitation to the Mac event, if you were invited, that if you clicked on the thing, it popped up a little AR thing in your phone's camera? Did you hear about that? I didn't see it, but I heard about it, read it like on Mac Rumors or something. So it's definitely
somebody can bring it up right now, I'm sure.
We'd have to be invited. I'm not invited.
No, but actually, the animation is all over the net.
Yeah, the animation you don't need to invite.
Find it, Mr. Preto.
I'm too tired.
Anyway, yeah. No, I think that we're going to see more. I think we're going to see a lot more in that area. But I think that understanding how to generate those models and how to work with them is going to be more and more important. So we definitely want to do more talks about those. Do we want to go back to more? So I started the education hours. I'm very committed to. So I want to have at least an hour in Friday and Saturday. I felt like kind of the open-ended hours on the far end. I don't know if I need to do that on Saturday. Just from a number, I look at the number of people, watching. And so I've gotten a lot of requests to go back to some of the technical stuff on the Saturday hours. Do people want more technical things again on Saturday? The ones that don't really fit into go ahead, Stuart.
I have no rugrats, so I have very little to contribute on education, which is why I've actually stayed out on the Fridays and Saturdays to make space in the panel for more people who are interested in education. But in talking to a few friends and what have you, and seeing what their kids are getting interested in, things like what Nick was explaining with Unreal and what have you, is what they're looking at as career paths. So I would like to see a little bit more of the technical side of those sorts of things, where it's emerging industries and emerging fields that are going to take over, especially with the implications for AI.
Yep. Bill, and then Sky.
For me, this whole experiment has been, I try to come and contribute what I do know, but I really keep coming back because there's so much that I don't know. And so that trade-off of seeing things that are outside of my purview that aren't on my radar yet, and just hearing people, this diverse group of people, talk about technologies and ideas that I wasn't aware of before has been the real value add for me as an individual. So I'm just hoping that we don't ever narrow into so strict a set of categories that the wild stuff doesn't sneak in, because sometimes that's where the magic is.
Right, absolutely.
Well,
Sky.
And that's why I love this as a living, breathing TED Talk, because we're constantly learning and learning how to learn. And I think that's why the word teaching is a bit of a misnomer in this conversation, Alex, as you talk about how do we but I'd almost flip it 180 as how do we continue to learn, because life's going to continue to get different.
Oh no, I just realized what Chris is showing.
This is the logo that was pulled out of the thing, and apparently, if you, it is a USDZ file, and there's your Apple logo.
Can you play it, Chris?
No, it doesn't play. It's just it is here. I'll show you up at the top of the screen here.
Chuck
it says Apple event.
Chuck showing it.
Yeah, there's a better way to show it.
Oh, I'm not too smart. What's the better way? Oh.
Well, it actually shows a background in it shows your room in 3 dimensions.
Understood. Okay, yeah, I'm looking at. Yeah, I saw that. But this is interactive. This is me just spinning around on this thing.
Yes,
but he's
look at
guys. It's doing it in his room.
Pin guy, please.
Guys got it. Yeah, that's how it works.
Yeah.
And he can circle around it.
And the file, it's called the file that I downloaded, Alex, is called apple_event.usdz.
I mean,
it's really interesting that everybody was commenting on the nature of how well the logo was designed in its one-dimensional fixed state. And I don't think any of them understood what was happening behind the scenes. So there was a level of understanding that wasn't being communicated when it first hit the web as a static image.
It doesn't matter what angle you watch it from, it will come out to say 9:15 at some point.
Yeah, Jeff, I'm just going to get a PC. You're right.
Here's the
issue. Does this imply that Apple is gone with
Okay.
a Pokemon Go rendering engine? Because the way it was displaying a guy, it looks like what people would see when holding their phone up for virtual stuff.
Correct.
Here's the thing: is that some of it's using image processing, but when you add the LiDAR to that back-facing camera, it means that it has the scale and location instantly. And so it is, so it doesn't have any of the with the LiDAR. Without the LiDAR, it'll do pretty well once it starts moving, but it'll still slip a little bit like Pokemon Go. With the LiDAR, it's locked in, and I think that anyway. So I know that we're digressing a little bit, and we'll go to some of the comments here in a second. But the real challenge is, and I think that, again, and I'll just say this one thing about that, and why I want us to pay attention to it in second hours or Saturdays or whatever, is that Apple's about to pull away, in that area. Because to do that, you need to own the hardware and the software and all the other bits and pieces, and I think that's part of why Unreal is or Epic is trying to fight right now, because the market is about to become really, really complicated for them. Where there's so many interactive things, and Unreal is in the middle of all of that. And they know that what Apple's doing is incredibly hard. And it's going to be almost impossible for other competitors, because they don't own all the pieces. And that's the issue. And motion being able to do 3D means that you can author pieces for it. Go ahead, John.
So I tried to use the measurement tool yesterday to show my buddies, but how accurate would you believe that the iPhone 12 LiDAR is going to be? Could a painter walk into a 12 by 12 bedroom, for example, and then scan the room, and would it give accurate measurements so that he could give an instant estimate?
My guess is 10 to 15 millimeters. That's probably the accuracy. I mean, a LiDAR scanner will be 2 or 3 millimeters, or maybe even 1 with enough time. But I think 10 to 15 for that kind of thing is probably
That's
the
huge for
range.
those guys, right?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Bill.
I was reading a story this morning about Apple's version of Tile, the little tagging thing, which everybody is kind of expecting to come out. And what they were saying was that with this technology means that you've lost your keys and you have your little tag on it. Now, if you lose your phone, it pings somewhere and you have to go find it. Now it's going to just show you a arrow. It's like in the couch between those two cushions done. And that's just one of the simplest little things.
When I know exactly where you are at a location, it's more than just finding stuff. When I know where you are in a location, I don't have to look at everything around you. I can simply go, I know where you are within 10 inches, right, which is what the ultra wide can do. I'm sorry, 10 centimeters. So I know where you are within 10 centimeters. I only have to hash this part of the scene to find out exactly where you are. And then I use LiDAR and image recognition to match you. And I can get, now I know where your phone is to less than a millimeter. And at that point, I can add all kinds of things to so imagine going to a basketball game and or anything where you turn the location into a completely different, you could have a different, the same location having an entirely different experience all the time. Let's move on to, let's go through some of these things. If we have time,
can I show one more? Sorry, can I show one more? Because this is just crazy. Like, look at this. This is a car on my keyboard, but look at the detail in this thing. It's crazy.
And when you think about education, this is how we got into this. When we think about education and being able to show things and describe things and do those types of processes it's going to be pretty interesting. Let's go some of the comments here.
Sure.
Joe at Alpha. Go ahead, Chris. Go ahead, read them.
I got it. Yeah. Joe at Alpha Creative says, Alex, I'd like to see more on cloud production and on workflows like the folks making novel use of Zoom, like a how we did this production breakdown.
A lot of times the how we did this is hard to do within the restrictions that we have about showing it. But if we can persuade Jeff to talk about some of those things, or at least talk about how he's approaching it, maybe get Blue and Grant and Jeff, and maybe not talk about specifically things, but.
Yeah, I would agree. I'd rather stay on a higher level on a lot of things, just because there are certain things we do that we don't want everybody to know. But I have no problem talking about, there's a lot to talk about. There's a whole lot of information there. You can't get it across.
Right.
But you can knock it out in pieces.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Hypothetically speaking, we could do something like this. Derek from Oakland says, I miss the network IP Saturdays. Maybe move it to Sunday?
I won't move it to Sunday. I want to keep Sunday unstructured. But I think that, again, we're looking at second hours of stuff. And so second, third, fourth, fifth hours on Saturday. Go ahead, Colin.
There we go. I'm happy to do a network engineering hour. I mean, between Jason, Jeff Powers, and I, we could probably field any network engineering question anybody here has.
Yeah, so we'll look at bringing those back.
We can do that.
Next question.
Craig Hibbard says, in looking for office hours content, what about having a disruptors day featuring non-technical people who work outside of traditional systems?
Yeah, just a matter of figuring out what those are. I mean, bringing some of the artists in that we've been bringing in on Thursday is kind of that direction of just kind of looking at those. Something, and it doesn't all have to be music artists, although we're going to do a lot of music artists. I'm kind of working through that process, but I think that finding more of those, I agree, makes sense. I'd like to get visual artists in, and even just other educators. Educators for the educator hour on Friday or Saturday would be really interesting. Any other suggestions there? Yeah, I think it's good. Yeah, go ahead, John.
How about no? Can he come on?
Sorry, say it again.
No, the Photoshop guy.
Yeah, I mean, when we're bigger, so like I'm not going to ask John to come on right now. I mean, I would really need it to be like 1,000 people showing up every morning for me to start asking John to come on. I mean, again, when we think about who we can invite and we think about whether we're sharing this or getting other people to join or everything else, the larger this number is, the more leverage we have to invite people. And I'm very careful of having them, making sure that they feel like, a lot of, like, when I look at artists, I look at, are they socially active? And if they are socially active, what are the number of people going to their live shows on Facebook or whatever? And if I think that we have more than that, then I think that we're viable. If we have less than that, I don't know if we are. John's also really working. I think he's really busy on I believe he's busy on a project right now for TV. Sky, and then Jeffrey.
Well, again, my heart of story first. And so
Mm-hmm.
the artists that are creating from scratch found, and so I guess the origin of story, the beginning, middle, end, how does it come from the mind onto a piece of paper or so that's a wish list for me.
Yep. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Well, since you put in a limitation, there goes my Tony Robbins suggestion. But how about anybody that's actually doing online speaking or anything like that? I mean, LinkedIn's is full of those types of people on their lives, so maybe we could tap into that market.
Go ahead, Stuart.
How about a little bit more on history and how things have developed, like the reasons we do things the way we do? Like, we've normally got access to Courtney, who's got some amazing stories. Would there be people, say, from Cook or from Zeiss or from Ari or the sound, like all the different companies, who could come in with some of the history of that side of, or each side of the industry?
Yeah, I think that I agree, and I think we have some pretty good guys. Marty Brennis, who's on here, has been, he was at ILM since Empire, so and there's a couple other folks that I know that are in that. It'd be kind of fun to bring them in to just reminisce a little bit and answer questions about how those things got built. But I think we could go back and do some interesting things. You're absolutely right. Go ahead, Chris.
In regards to history, I will say that the older I get, and it's getting worse every year, it seems, the more I realize, one, most people don't really care about the way we used to do it. And as a cautionary tale, I think part of the reason why I've been able to last as long as I have in this business is, and I'm sure people like Courtney would tell you the same thing, you always have to be looking over the fence anyway. So I try to forget a lot of the past and look toward learning new things. Like in the last few months from you guys, I learned what WebRTC was.
Right. Well, I find it as I get older to be really interested in how we got to where we are. Like really, I'm just fascinated by, especially as I deal with things like HDR. I'm dealing with a lot of that right now, and as I kind of dig through that, like understanding how we got there and why it's important and scientifically what it is I do like digging into it a bit. Go ahead, Bill. I can't hear you.
I'm sorry. For me, the difference is that sometimes reminiscing is just reminiscing. You're just reliving a past that is gone. And I agree with Chris that you can spend too much time back there just marinating in that. But if you learned lessons along the way that you find have resonance to today, if you can get somebody to bring up those stories, here's where we ran into a wall and the solution we found for running into that wall back when we were moving from DV to something else, that might have relevance to a person moving into this new era.
We're going to move on because I want to get through some of the questions and I have to stop about 5 minutes before the top of the hour. So go ahead and next
question. Thomas Bauer says, is there a way we can vote on topics similar to questions, but at higher level topics? Could we then grab top topics that people are willing to take on for the week?
I think we're working on being able to take them on. The voting thing for that, the problem is the number of people voting is going to be a small percentage of the number of people showing up. And, I think we have to kind of figure creatively just how have these conversations about once a month and just talk about how are we doing. I think this is a place where voting would probably not necessarily represent the audience well enough. There's a passive audience that will just be frustrated. So so we have to kind of take that into account as well.
That would encourage them to be less passive.
Yeah, but I'd also lose a whole bunch of viewers at the same time. Next question.
Victor, our own Victor says, I'd love to see a second hour on security multimedia. Would this be additive? I don't know what you mean, Victor.
Security multimedia.
Victor left.
Yeah, I don't. He's gonna.
I'd love to see security combined with privacy.
Yeah,
I think privacy is
gonna-
such a huge subject right now.
Yeah.
I was going to try and get some clarification there. Security as in network security or DRM or
As if I'm guessing as if you're passing video through, making it more secure so somebody doesn't get on a Zoom call and
Yeah, that could be it. Yeah, and there's a lot of things there. Yeah. Next question.
Interesting question. James says, Alex, if you were to be on TED, what topic would you choose?
I'd probably choose the topic of exploring scalable conversations. Just what we're doing here. But that's what I think of it as, the scalable conversations, and what that means and how it works. And it's what I've been doing for a long time. This is just the most recent version of that. Roscoe?
So Alex just invited us all to join his TED Talk.
Yeah,
yeah, I think we've been on his TED Talk for the last 5 months. The
been
problem
the
is
you are
TED
the
is
TED
normally
Talk.
limited in time, and
Yeah,
you've
yeah,
taken
exactly.
5 months to do yours. So fail.
All right, next question. Next
TJ
comment.
Asher says, could we do some items on filmmaking, script writing, directing, editing, etc., as a possible second hour?
Yeah, we need to do more of that, just on the creative end of that. So I think that'd be good.
Thomas Bauer from Atlanta says, would really help if we had the schedule for the second hour before the week.
It'd be really helpful if I had it defined. So I'm working on getting some help from folks to get that sorted out. A lot of it is just right now my production schedule is hard to describe. Like it's really intense. And so added to the 3 hours of this, I just don't have, other than weekends, I can't really think about it. Saturday afternoon is when I have to define everything, and I haven't gotten to all of it. But we have people that are going to be starting to help me with that, and I think we should be able to sort that out. Go ahead, John.
Hey, Alex, what are you seeing? What's really interesting here in Vegas is all the production companies, and my buddy Perry that I introduced you to works for one of the largest planning. They all have their head in the sand, and they're waiting things to come back to normal. What are you guys seeing as far as the timeline going into next year, 2020 possibly?
There'll be no major events until the end of 2021 at the earliest. That's what almost everybody thinks. And then after that, the technology is going to move so far past it. They'll probably the number of large events will probably be 1/3 of what they were in the before COVID forever. Like it's not, like this isn't going to be like a little change. And the reason for that is that there's a bunch of us. I'm already bidding on projects that I'm probably going to drag Jeff into, and I'm going to drag Blue and Grant into, that I'm doing, that once we start doing them, no one's going back. Like once they see, like, it's like what Tony Robbins is doing is cute, but we're talking about taking it to a whole different level of online, where for 1/100th of the cost, I can reach 10 times the number of people. And once you start turning that switch, nobody who writes the checks, it doesn't matter whether people want to go drink or they want to go meet people, or they want to, the people writing the checks aren't going to do that anymore. They're just going to be like, this doesn't pencil out, and that's what we're, it's not there yet, because we keep on trying to take the old event structure and push it into the new event structure. And that's like, that doesn't work. But as we start stepping past that and going, hey, we're going to do a whole different thing, blowing up, like it's going to be like, and no one's going back after that. There'll be little events. It's not like there won't be any events, but it's going to be few and far between. Let's go to a couple more questions. I got to leave here in like a minute. So let's just see what we'll take. Go ahead. Yeah. YouTubers and TikTokers. Yeah. I want to bring more of those in. Some of those, I know some really big TikTokers and YouTubers, and this gets back to size of the audience, as whether I'll invite them or not. Go ahead. Next.
This morning's
3D
discussion, 3D printing.
Yes, we're gonna do an hour of that. Yeah, like soon, because now I'm really into it. Like it's been, someone else did it for me before that, and so now I have a printer and I have it running, and now I'm like, oh, we got to talk more about it. I have no idea what.
At least 2 hours in this. The first hour being talking about 3D printers, maybe building one or building parts of one.
Yeah,
I
no,
mean, you
absolutely.
can build them from scratch in about 4 hours. If we did it in an organized fashion, we could probably do it in an hour, or some section of it in an hour. Another thing
Yeah,
to
well,
consider is a
but
collaborative. Hang on. Another thing to consider
okay,
is
I gotta go.
a
I'm
collaborative,
gonna have to go.
a collaborative
So
product
I'm trying to get
design
to the last two questions. I got it. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so but I agree with you that we should do it. I'm sorry, I just got to keep moving. Next comment.
Searchable index of shows. I would say use YouTube. The work that Jeff Powers does makes that possible. And then the last question is, Steven says, would it be possible to find out from? Probably. I'm going to say possibly.
Absolutely.
And I will say
Absolutely.
there's got to be a way to delete something in Makana. So when you hit return too soon.
All right. Okay. Very good. All right, everybody. I got to go really fast, so I'm not going to do the typical thing. I'm just going to say goodbye. There we go. All right. Thanks, everybody. We will see you in the morning. Thanks so much. All right. Take care.